Okay, hello all you crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games and stuff like that, and let's make some games. This is a tower defense game in 3D in Game Maker Studio 2.3. And the last couple of videos have been mostly visual stuff. I've done a lot of setting up level design systems and saving and loading map files and that sort of thing. Oh, and also kind of sort of making a level editor. That was exciting. And today it's going to be back to gameplay things. So I've wanted for a little while to do things like tower bonuses, so that towers have a way to like shoot faster and have extra range and stuff. Not so much like towers leveling up or that sort of thing, although that's definitely something that will be done in some way, shape, or form later. I'm thinking of like I don't know, if you have an excited little tower that cheers on its neighbors and the towers around to get more damage points or something like that. It may be wiser to not do that right now and instead do things like tower leveling. They're both going to get done probably in the next couple of videos, so I don't know, project management. Anyway, firstly, I am going to get rid of I'm going to unload the map file. I got that done. That was exciting, but I don't want it to be getting in the way visually right now. Let's see. So I wrote down on this here paper how this is going to work, or how I think it's going to work anyway, since I don't know exactly how it's going to go. Let me go to tower, and when it comes to things like their range and things like their damage, those are stored in the class variables. So the tower's base class, the bullet's base class has a damage value and that sort of thing. Those I think now should be moved into variables belonging to the towers themselves. There are going to be a number of things that affect those. Like I said, bonuses from like status effect towers, or just leveling up or something in some way, shape, or form and getting stronger. So I think it's time to assign each of those to the tower object. Let me open up, if I can close those library things. Let me open up the database. I'm going to split that into two windows so I can see them both. Tower data is here. There is a bit of extra white space at the end of that line, which I don't want. There is a fire rate, there's a range, a damage rate. Cost isn't going to be relevant to towers after they're placed, although if you want things like a cost to level up a tower, it might be, but that's probably going to be some different variable than this. The 3D model possibly might change if you want like towers to look different when they level up, and bullet data, which I'll leave for now. Actually, no, I won't, because there's no harm in doing that. Self dot, let's call it, I'll prefix them all with stat. Class dot rate, and we can do this for each of these properties. Actually, I'll call it base rate and base whatever, because since we're talking about modifiers now, those will change once in a while. Model. That's not really like a base model, because you're not going to multiply the vertex buffer model by a number or anything, because that doesn't really make sense. But for the sake of consistency. What was shot type for? I feel like that was probably a precursor to bullet data. I won't get rid of it now, but I'll just make a note that it's probably not important. And also bullet data. Okay. So now instead of things like shot cooldown being set to the class's fire rate, it's going to be our fire rate instead. And let's see. Right now, I think towers. Let's make this one column now, since I don't need it currently. I think tower damage is just based solely on bullet damage, right? There's get target, there's shoot, and I want to say when a bullet intersects an enemy. Okay, that's just hard-coded to 1. So I'll give alright, bullets don't have their own damage rating, so I'll just give that right now in the form of a parameter to the constructor. And in a lot of cases for now that's going to be 1. But that's fine. Is the bullet data class used for anything besides the bullet vertex buffer? Not really. And that may not even like keep a vertex buffer. That might be a particle or something instead later on. So I will not worry about that. So with that said, the towers class isn't used for anything at this point. I replaced those all with my own variables. Okay, that's fine. Let's see, I had to think about that for a minute. Next, let's do something something similar for modifications. We're going to have a modification for the rate, the range, the damage, the model, and the class doesn't really make sense. Those are going to be 1. Those will be multiplied by these values to get to the actual values. So if you have a 10% buff to damage, you'll be multiplying the base damage by 1.1 when you get that value. There's going to be I'll call it active fire rate, active range, and active damage. So that's going to be base rate times that. Much the same thing for the other two. Like that. And in a somewhat like halfway object-oriented programming paradigm, we're going to have setters for those. I'm not going to include getters, like accessor functions, for the active rate, active range, and active damage and other things, because it's not really needed to. GameMaker doesn't really have accessor modifiers, although I guess you could just make this entire thing a function instead of saving it to a variable. And 3, speed. If you're calling it many times in the step event, you probably don't want the overhead of calling a method to get that. I generally don't use the self keyword outside of the actual constructor. You may wish to use the self keyword when you're always when you're referring to variables that belong to the struct, instance variables as it were. You may wish to use them like never. Some people really prefer to use these things never. It's up to you. There's no technical reason for that other than like how messy you want your code to get or not get. Let's see. So now instead of grabbing the base bullets data, we will be grabbing. That can stay. Active damage and active range and active rate, active fire rate. Okay, this has been like a lot of refactoring code to start your video and very little actually running the game. I'm sorry that it's kind of been that way today so far, but hopefully things will. I opened up editor mode. Hopefully things will get a little more exciting going forward.
Hey.
Alright, everything is behaving the same. You guys are killing me. Because you're moving too fast and the bullets are literally missing you. It's generally not how you want your tower defense games to work. That is... Some games handle that differently than others. Some games have the bullets home in on the enemies. Some games have them like, just give the enemies abnormally big hitboxes, so it's really hard to actually miss them. Anyway. Game feel stuff, that can come later. This is working the same as before. The fire rate is the same, the range is the same. They were doing the same amount of damage, and by that I mean nothing was dying because they have 10 HP and they're taking 1 damage per shot, most of which are missing. Do I want to call them stat accessors in the commit message? Enemies will probably have a similar system later. Do I want to do that for enemies now? Okay, 1. I'm gonna give these things bigger hitboxes. Let's make them like 18. Let's increase the hitbox radius by about 50%. Because that's kind of annoying when they miss. And 2, I keep accidentally hitting It looks like some of them are hitting at least. I keep accidentally hitting the tab key instead of the spacebar to launch a wave, and I'm going into edit mode. Speaking of edit mode, I'm finally gonna fix that. Yeah, give me a minute and I will mirror the changes to tower that I did to tower, and I will mirror them to enemies. It seems that, okay, so it seems that a lot of that has actually already been done. For whatever reason, I designed this differently when I was writing enemies than towers, and I don't know why. Defense, magic defense, which I'm still not entirely sure if I'm going to be using. It just seems kind of par for the course for these kinds of things. Damage and reward, those are going to stay the same. Those only affect when they die or you die. HP, once in a while you'll see a video game that contains like buffed total HP. I don't really like that. It doesn't hugely bother me, but I feel like it's kind of unnecessary complication when you add like a buffed max HP or something. The base variables for the enemy are going to be defense, magic defense, and speed. So we can likewise have modifiers for those. Those will all be 1. And you can calculate their actual values. You know what, this is kind of redundant. No, I'm not just going to create this variable by calling this function. That'll be playing with fire. Let's see. Active defense, active magic defense, and active speed. I can type the word DEF with one hand, which is great if I want to leave the other hand on the mouse, but I cannot do the same for MDEF and speed. Oh, I also did not do the names for these stats properly. Oops. Rate mod and damage mod. Okay. Now where these are used, I don't believe defense is used for anything, right? Right? I don't think so. Speed is used in the update here. So I just need to change that to active speed, and I believe that's it. Game.player damage. This could be... That could just be damage, since there's already a variable for that. I don't know why it wasn't in the first place. And... I'm looking to see if there's anything else. I don't believe there is. It's like I said, the defenses aren't used, and these things don't exactly attack outside of dealing damage once they get to the end of the track. Okay, that looks like it, right? And if I run the game, it'll work exactly the same. I am 17 minutes into this recording, and so far the game works exactly the same way as it did when I started. None of those towers are anywhere near. Did it again? None of those towers are anywhere near the path, or at least near each other. They're kind of shooting. Alright. I'm going to commit that, and let's see what is on this list. Condense all buffs and penalties into a single value. I've done that. Apply this to both towers and enemies. Theoretically bullets too, but I don't foresee that being used. Pull for status effects at the beginning of updates so that things don't have to be constantly checked. Okay. That is another logical step. I might do this for enemies too. In addition to towers. We'll see how the game goes. So regular Game Maker has a step event, a begin step event, and an end step event. Let me collapse the editor step event now so that I don't have to have it taking up space. I can do that. It just has to be done manually. We can say like begin update and end update. I think... And the point of this is so that like code doesn't step on the toes of other pieces of code. I'm just going to call this like begin step, begin update, or whatever. And that is going to be a method for all entities. There is somewhat of an optimization thing you might wish to do here, involving not calling an empty method. I don't think I'm not going to do that now. There will be a time and a place for optimization later. That is camera entity is over here. There needs to be a begin update. Like all these inherited methods that are just empty that are being called, the short version of what I'm talking about is you can instead set them to undefined or some other non-function value. And when you call them, instead of calling everything all the time, you can check to see if the method is not undefined first, and that would save you a little bit of time. It's not a huge amount of time. It's not like you should always do that if you have a function body that doesn't contain anything, but if you're going to do this to, for example, a couple hundred things in the step event, you may wish to not waste time by calling empty methods. Anyway, perhaps we can do this, and we can create a special kind of tower. And I'll make it extend the regular tower. I'll call it entity tower buff. And it will inherit from entity tower, pass in the default arguments. And its update method is going to be somewhat different. Instead of shooting things on a loop, it is going to instead have its shot cooldown. And it's going to buff its neighbors instead. It's going to implement its own get target thing. And instead of targeting enemies, it's going to target its friends, which sounds horrible. But it's going to do nice things to them instead of shooting things at them. Okay, so there's going to be target, friend. I'm going to call this buff instead of shoot, because we're not shooting things. And Is there an all? Is there an all towers? There is not an all towers. There probably should be. Okay, so there's now an all towers list. I will commit that one single change. Without the change to the entities code, the tower code. Okay, you know what, just because I'm picky about this, let's not commit the begin update loop at the same time as this. And also, let's not commit the buffing tower at the same time as the begin update. Gotta keep my commits organized. Such as that. Now we can put it back. Okay. Let's see. Let's target our friends instead of the foes. Let's leap through all towers instead of all foes. We're gonna call it our friend instead. And if you're within the radius, we will apply, like if we're within the range defined by the tower class, we're going to apply the buff. Okay, that is going to be in here. And instead of like seeking something out and shooting them, because that would be mean, we will say target friend dot set what do I want to buff? Fire rate would be the most fire rate would be the most visible, so we'll say set rate mod. And that's going to, let's multiply that by 4. That's going to be utterly ridiculous, but we'll be able to see that things are happening there. And just for the sake of actually spawning one of these, I do want to be able to spawn a normal tower, but I also want to be able to spawn a special buffing tower. And this is very temporary. This will be replaced by a much better system later. If I'll use the shift key to test things here. We will create a buff tower instead of a shooty tower. Okay. That should be everything I need. How long am I in this recording? 26 minutes. Time flies when you're having fun. Let's create some of those guys. I'll just build a tower there. And if I hit the shift key, that was the shift key, right? Okay, you know what? I want a visual indication that that is what is going on. So I'm going to make a separate model. Let's make another rook. Or at least let's turn it like red or something. Let's call it tower buff. And we will just change the vertex colors to something else. I'm sorry, did I say red? I meant blue. Because blue looks cooler. Okay. Let's actually make one of those. That's going to have a name. It's going to have a model, which is tower buff, and it is not going to shoot anything, but we'll give it a bullet parameter anyway. Oh wait, you know what? Stop. No, hey, stop. We're not actually building it. We're still building the other one, the tower type, the class, which you pass in. Okay, you can go. I will hit the shift key and build one of those, and we are not actually increasing the fire rate. Actually, we seem to be slowing the fire rate. Is that math correct? We have ways to test that it's actually doing what we think it's doing. Such as printing out something if we're actually going to give something a buff. Also, if you want this to happen to everything in Radius, that's just going to apply the effect to the first thing it finds. Okay, so it is applying the buff. That's good. I will get to making it applying the effect to everything in Radius shortly. But for now, we need to figure out why it's not actually being used. It may be that, so the fire... Hang on. I am almost falling out of my chair. The fire rate is currently in shots per second. If I increase that... If I increase it from like 1 shot per second to 4 shots per second, that'll be... Okay, the math should be right. We'll see what it comes up with. It's still being 1. Oh, you know why that is? I know why that is. That is very dumb. The modifiers are not actually being set to anything. That would do it. Yeah. Alright, and the foes need the same thing. Alright, this is a number of fixes in this one commit. And I think I'm just gonna have to live with that instead of trying to actually do one, like, make small commits is the general software engineering practice. Alright, I will build you there. And we still seem to be firing at about the same rate. Oh, is it applying it to itself? I think it's applying it to itself. That's not... That's fun. That's not how this is supposed to work. We can say if friend equals self, continue, and just don't even bother. And this is again getting back to the part where it's only targeting one tower. I definitely suspect it was targeting itself. There we go, now it's going faster, hooray! And if I were to... Currently that buff is permanent, until something else sets it. If I were to implement some kind of penalty tower that would reduce its fire rate to half. There should be a way for that to wear off, which is where I was going halfway a video ago when I was talking about the begin update thing. The idea for that would have been to make the buff wear off after a period of time, so... say the buffing tower only does its thing like every... I don't know, every couple seconds, and the buff only lasts for 1 second or something like that. Or maybe if you were to sell the tower, the buff would last a little bit longer before doing that. Anyway, this, in order for this to apply to everybody, that would need to be a list or some other... And let's make that plural just to make it correct. And that'll now return more than one value. You could also use an array or something. I would use a list in this case because it is going to need to be a growable size depending on what's around you. Now instead of if target friends, we can iterate over those instead of treating them as a fixed size of one collection. Let's send you in. I'm going to build a couple towers, and I'm going to hold shift, and it broke. Deist size target friends. Did I... 163, line 163, that's this thing here. Oh, get targets. Needs to be plural. The old function gets targets still exists, and it is still returning one value. It does not need to do that, though. Actually, you know what? Just so that can't happen, and so that can't screw me up in the future, I'll change it back to that. Also, memory leaks. Always a fun time. All right, let's try that again. I'll just spawn a couple of those around, send in the first wave, and those guys are getting shredded. They are not standing a chance against the buffed towers. Okay. On a technical level, that is working. On a gameplay level, that is slightly broken. What else was there that I wanted to do? I've been going for 35 minutes. I don't think I want to go any farther than this. I don't think I want to have the effects wear off. They will need to wear off eventually, because if you can just permanently buff all of your things, that'll be a little bit bad. Also, it's possible that towers receive a buff or a penalty from more than one source at once, in which case they will all need to be taken into account. But for now, I will say this is done. In my notes, I wrote down do a demo tower, which increases damage, but I do think fire rate is more visually indicative of what's actually going on. Alright. And I also made a note to remind myself and whoever reading the note aloud to that this the system will probably be expanded in the future to include other things, such as if there's a weather condition. Just looking to see what else was written down in here. I hope that page turning is not too loud. Weather conditions are like some special beacon on the map that affects stats in some way or another. Let's see. I've written down for the next week of these things to do particles, but I don't know if we're at a stage where that's going to be something that's very visually impressive yet, so I might hold off on that. Tower stats, foe levels. Yeah, I mentioned like levels of towers and foes at the beginning, or towers at least. I don't know if I mentioned foes. Since I've done this now, it would definitely make sense to do progression of some sort soon, which doesn't necessarily have to be a tower leveling up. It could be like your tower getting some other kind of upgrade that isn't related to isn't strictly related to a level. I've played an unfortunately large number of tower defense games in the last probably year or so, and a lot of them do things differently. And there's a lot of things that can work. Discrete upgrades versus levels versus anything in between. I've also written down to start visually designing tower models. I know the asset collection that I'm using for the like the level stuff, like the trees and rocks and stuff, come from a guy called Kenny. And he does have a tower defense asset collection too, but I don't know how extensive it is. I may or may not use it. I may just make my own blobby shapes in Model Creator. We'll see. I've written down a couple pages for more map design, which I think is going to be fun, although I think that's a little ways off. In a lot of these videos, I've expected to get more complete than I did. And I should probably have known better than to try and contain so much work in a single one of these, but like I'm not gonna make a 3-hour video if that's what it means to get everything done that I've written down. I'm just gonna break it up over multiple days, but we'll see how that goes. Audio for tower shots and tower hits and enemy hits and stuff, and ambient noises. That should be fun. Alright, anyway. Let's see. Let's stop looking ahead, at least for now. I am going to commit these changes. We have implemented the buffing tower. And I'm going to end it off here. So, this has been making a tower defense game in 3D in GameMaker Studio 2.3. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute towards these videos being made, there's a link to that in the usual places. Otherwise, the code for this is in the video description. Look for the 0.12 release on the GitHub repository, since this is the 12th week that I'm doing this. 0.12. I try to post 2 game dev videos a week. One of these, one tutorial, usually with 3D GameMaker things, sometimes other things. I hope you all found that interesting, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Edward Holt, Indie Punch, PoshoDev, and Zenith for supporting these videos. If you want your name in the credits and to force me to say them out loud at the end, head over to the Patreon page in the video description and join the fun.